Hey class, welcome back. And in this unit, we will explore the topic of immigration and its relationship to the various push and pull factors that influence this complex phenomenon.
A push factor is a social, political, or economic condition that compels people to leave their place of origin. Examples of social push factors include racial, religious, or lifestyle persecution, or any kind of intolerance directed against a community. Other major push factors are natural disasters. For example, earthquakes like those that led to Haitian immigration into Tijuana, or events like famine, drought, and hurricanes. Any disaster that would destabilize a local economy. Let's now address the pull factors. Pull factors are also social, political, and economic in nature. An example of an economic pull factor could be a strong economy in the United States, growing industries, or any market where people are likely to be welcome to work in certain sectors. A social pull factor could be a political atmosphere that is pro immigrant or welcoming to refugees. A positive political pull factor would be one where the current administration is pushing an agenda that is favorable to immigration, such as amnesty or general immigration reform. All of these become powerful pull factors. Economic transformation and labor needs. In the last quarter of the 19th century, the United States underwent a massive economic transformation. This change involved technological advancement, industrialization, new energy sources, domestic and foreign capital, and rapid urbanization. The financial system of the American Southwest, for instance, shifted from a local plaza economy to national and international markets. This economic development primarily occurred in three main labor intensive sectors: agriculture, mining, and transportation. The growth of these industries came at a time when there were major changes to traditional labor forces in the U.S., such as the end of slavery in the South, but also a series of anti Asian immigration policies, a painful part of our long history of labor discrimination. You might ask yourself, what do laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Gentleman's Agreement of 1907 have to do with Mexican immigration? It's quite simple. As one labor dependency was cut off, a dependency on another grew. As American immigration policies targeted Chinese and Japanese immigrants who were instrumental in many sectors, those industries began to rely heavily on Mexican workers coming across the border. This was particularly true in areas like Arizona and California, where growing sectors like mining and agribusiness needed larger labor forces. Concrete pull factors and legislation. A series of laws and events acted as concrete pull factors for Mexican labor. The Dingley Tariff, 1897. This placed a tax on foreign sugar, with the idea of supporting the growth of the domestic U.S. sugar industry. By making foreign sugar more expensive, the American sugar industry grew and subsequently became desperate for labor, which was sourced from across the border in Mexico. The Newlands Reclamation Act, 1902. The goal here was to trigger agricultural growth in the Southwest by bringing in irrigation projects, such as dams. The resulting boom in agribusiness and farming again created a tremendous need for workers from Mexico. The Immigration Law of 1917. Many U.S. laws passed in the early 20th century were intended to keep the country primarily white European. The 1917 immigration law is interesting because, while it placed a tax and literacy requirements on most legal immigrants, the U.S. was engaged in World War I. There were concerns that a lack of workers from Mexico would impact the objective of victory. As a result, the law was tailored in 1917 so that Mexican immigrants did not have to pay the tax or pass the literacy examination. The reason, of course, was the immediate need for those workers. The enganche system, early 20th century. This system appeared primarily in the mining sector in Arizona. American mining companies knew that many people across the border in Mexico had been mining for generations and had perfected their techniques. Recruiters, called los enganchadores, were sent across the border to recruit these skilled workers, often to come without documentation, to work for American companies. This is a very good early example of a pull factor and a growing dependency on Mexican labor. In the early 20th century, there was even a term used in public spaces called Mexican work, referring to jobs done primarily by Mexican people. Typically low-pay, dangerous jobs with no path for upward mobility. The Bracero program and labor dependency. Perhaps the most classic example of a pull factor and a dependency on Mexican labor is the controversial Bracero program, which ran from 1942 to 1964. The program was first enacted at the beginning of World War II because the U.S. faced immediate labor shortages at home and needed workers from across the border. The program was supposed to last only while the war was ongoing, but the war ended in 1945, and the Bracero program continued until 1964. By its end, almost 5 million men had come from Mexico to work in the United States. Consequences. The Bracero program had several long-lasting consequences. Dependency. It created a deep dependency by U.S. growers on Mexican labor, an appetite that continues to this day. Demographics. 5 million men coming to the U.S. meant that many eventually stayed behind, forming colonias and families in the United States. Controversy. The program is controversial due to widespread abuse by the growers against the workers, including low wages, exploitation, long hours, and often violence. Why Mexican labor is crucial. Why was and why is Mexican labor so important today, whether documented or not? Low cost. Mexican labor is low cost. For example, even today, you can see a significant difference between the U.S. minimum wage and a typical daily wage just across the border in Tijuana. Skilled and unskilled pools. Mexico offers pools of both skilled and unskilled labor. As we discussed, mining and transportation required skilled workers, but agriculture also benefits from both. Unorganized labor. Immigrants coming from Mexico were largely unorganized, not typically seeking union membership. They were simply seeking jobs and opportunities. Accessibility and disposability. Mexican labor was, and is, easily accessible and located right across the border. During the Bracero program, for instance, the U.S. required that Mexican workers be available at any time and amount from the border. However, the same reality is that Mexican labor is also easily discarded. Once the need is gone, workers can be sent back across the border. For most Americans, immigration from Mexico feels like a contemporary issue. In reality, there's been over 100 years of codependency between American labor needs and Mexican labor pools. Policies today, like immigration reform debates, the wall, DACA, and anti-refugee stances, are simply the latest chapters in this long, complex history.